everybody, Invisiblekatana here, and today I would like to discuss the PlayStation price hike. So it's an unfortunate time in gaming. It's the third and final, unless the Steam Deck comes out like, yeah, we're increasing prices too. It is the final time that we will have a price increase for, one of the big consoles of the generation. And it's unfortunate. It's sad. If there's one minute form of solace in this, it is the fact that I consider this the best of the worst for whatever that's worth. Nintendo and obviously Xbox, they already did theirs, and Nintendo's was absolutely insane because they were like, hey, I know we just put out the brand new console, the Switch 2, but also let's increase the prices on everything that's been out for like nearly an effing decade at this point, which is absolutely insane. So that was ridiculous when they did it. And then Xbox did theirs, and it was like, okay, at least it's the current stuff. But then they were like, yeah, we're doing $100 on everything. Like, what are you talking? Like, you want that 2 terabyte Galaxy Edition? Why don't you give up your baby? It's like, why don't you give us a good Halo game? Didn't see that coming, did you? So crazy times with them because the price increase of $100 was so insane. And then PlayStation finally did theirs, which they'd already done some stuff overseas, but it finally ended up hitting the States, and it was like, hey, we're gonna do $50, and it was like, okay. That still sucks. That's still tragic because it's still ridiculous. Like, no matter what, like I said, it's the best of the worst, but it's still insanely ridiculous that we are at a point in gaming history where consoles increase. Not even, technically speaking, I know Nintendo always does their kind of offset, which is why the Switch 2 is out, but still, technically speaking, that's last gen for them at this point, and it's like, that's utterly insane, especially because theirs is the oldest one and it went up in price. We're still going through the Xbox era and PlayStation era at this point where of course they're talking about PS6 and stuff like that, and we'll see what happens with them. We'll see what happens with Xbox and them doing whatever this next thing is going to be, where it seems like they're going to try to fully integrate the whole the Microsoft ecosystem with the gaming side of things. If they pull it off and they actually end up doing like Game Pass across the board is exactly the same, that might actually do something. Because for those of you that are unaware, Game Pass on PC is not the same as Game Pass on the actual Xbox console, which is why I've mentioned this like multiple times. It drives me insane. Like, I really want to play the OG Ninja Gaiden 2, but I can't do that because I don't have the actual console, because Ninja Gaiden Black and Ninja Gaiden 2, like the original versions, never got PC ports. So you can't get those on like the PC, Game Pass, because there weren't PC versions. So if they end up integrating that somehow and like making it work, that would be absolutely amazing. I don't really see that happening because, that would literally be creating a PC port. But if the technology's there, then the technology's there. I feel like in some form of streaming, you can make that happen. But we're not there yet. So we'll see what ends up happening. We got the ROG Ally X coming out, which, the prices aren't 100% confirmed, but it was crazy that they announced it and was like, yeah, here's the date it's coming out, but also here's not the price because we don't really know what we want to do. Kind of like how Nintendo did their thing where it was like, I think they held off for a hot minute when they did the reveal announcement, and then they kind of waited like right after to be like, okay, yeah, we'll make this the price of the console. They weren't like 100% sure. So it's interesting. It's an unfortunately interesting time with seeing how games are gonna turn out in the future. And this is of course my favorite hobby, which is why I do nerdy videos like this, ranting on my way to work. But it's sad. It's really unfortunate, like, especially with the element of the consoles just being older, where it's like, hey, and I've been on Twitter and stuff, you see the posts where people are like, man, we're never gonna have this in gaming, where they show like the old school bundles that used to come out, where it's like, hey, this console's like 4 or 5 years old now, we slashed the price by like $100 to $150, and also here's like one of our most popular games, so it'll kind of entice you to buy it. Or they used to have these bundles for PS3 where it was, you get a game and you get a controller with it, and it would be like, hey, here's this bundle of games, where it'll either be like, I think one of them was like the God of War Saga collection thing that's like, here's this game, and then here's a controller with it. So if you don't have a controller, or at least a second controller, here you go. Here's Resistance 1 and 2, and here's a controller with it. And it was funny seeing that one because I actually did that on PS3. It wasn't both games, it was just Resistance 2, but I remember doing that, and it was like, hey, that's one of the games that's like on my list when I first got my PS3. I was going through and picking everything up. And it was like, all right, well, I want Resistance. Of course, Resistance 2 was out at that point. So I was like, all right, I'll get both Resistance games. I'm going to get both the Uncharted games. So I got Uncharted 2 when I actually got my console. Once again, you go in, you get a console years later. I got Uncharted 2 and Medal of Honor for free. And it was like, cool. I got my cheaper PS3 Slim, and I instantly got 2 games. And then I went to GameStop, and I got probably the first time I actually bought a bunch of used games, because the game, at that point, the PS3 Slim had come in. And it was like, the games I'm looking for are so old, they weren't even new anymore, because that's how long it took. So, went in, got a bunch of used games, and it was like, cool. Now I have, like a nice little stack of games, now that I have a PS3. And now you go into the era of PS5 or Xbox Series X and S, and somehow the first Nintendo Switch, even though the second one is already out, and it's like, oh, the prices are higher than when the game effing came out. I got my Switch cheaper than what someone would be able to get it for today, and I got a bundle from Kohl's of all places, which is the weirdest thing in the world. Like, I always shout out Kohl's because they had like a ridiculous deal. Like, I got my game, I got the carrying case, and I got the little Wiimote chargers, and it was like a savings of like almost $100 or something like that. Like, doing all that stuff together, it was a great deal. And it's like, that's crazy. That's crazy. I got one of those bundles, and I'm sure, for eons we will be seeing Mario Kart 8 on the Nintendo Switch, because my God, they don't put anything else with that FN console. It's ridiculous. But I'm sure that deal will still be out there, and I'm very curious what's going to happen when the holidays hit, because that's always the big thing. Like, hey, prices drop down, so now even video game consoles are going to do what like everything else does during Black Friday, where it's like, hey, we're discounting it to this price. And it's like, well, that was always the price. It's like, yeah, but we're saying it's a discount, so that's the discount price. But it's going to be interesting. Prices are going to drop during the holidays back to what they were when they first came out, and it's like, wow, these are savings now, and that's very tragic. So it's an unfortunate time. It's a very unfortunate time, but we kind of saw it coming, where it was like, especially with PlayStation being the last one, technically only in the States, because like I said, they'd already done price increases in other countries. So it was like, all right, we know what's happening. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. And, they hit you with the $50, and it sucks. Not that I was ever really in the position to be getting, a PS5 Pro. My dream was there. It was like, hey, I would love to get a PS5 Pro, because, PS5 Pro enhanced. Like, why not? Like, why wouldn't I want that? But unless I win the lottery or something, or somebody, you want to, toss a couple of bucks my way, or just throw me a PlayStation 5 Pro. My Cash App is just Invisiblekatana. I am at Invisiblekatana on everything. I'm serious about that. So if you want to, hey, Invisiblekatana right there, Cash App. But outside of that, and the great fortune of others, I'm not getting a PS5 Pro. And I didn't get, a PS4 Pro, which is why my leap from PS4 to PS5 was really cool. Some people felt like it wasn't that much of a leap, but I thought that was crazy, because I'm like, I went from a base PS4 to a PS5. And while some games might not have like the insane increase, because of course we spent half this generation, another element as to why it's so insane that, the price hikes are happening, because it's like, admittedly, and this goes for everybody except for Nintendo, really, because they only had the Switch. But for PlayStation as well as Xbox, you have multiple versions of games coming out, where it's like, hey, we're 5 years in, and I mean, honestly, I'm on PS5, I don't know, but we're still getting a boatload of games that are like, hey, PlayStation 4. Like, it was just big news that like Genshin Impact was like, hey, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. Like, we're done with the PS4. Like, we're done with that. We're done. So that was news, because it was like, hey, we're 5 years in, and now we're officially transitioning over to, no more updates for PS4. But there's still games coming out on PS4. There are probably going to be games coming out on the PS4 for like the next 2 years. I believe that. I think we still have like 2 more years before it's just straight PS5. I would love for it to be right now, it's just PS5, because that would actually allow for the games to just be maxed out on the PS5, and that would be great. Of course, the games still look good, but it does make a bit of a difference. It's just like the whole Xbox thing, where it's like, hey, you have to make this run on the Series S, and that was a huge constraint on creators, where it was like, hey, this has to run on garbage and also on the good stuff. And that's pretty much how it's been for the entire generation, and that's been effing with people. And now it's been the same way for PlayStation at this point as well, because of how they've been doing it with cross-platform releases. And Now we're hitting price hikes on cross-platform release consoles, and that's just kind of crazy. That, it's just an extra element of the craziness, honestly. I mean, the price hikes alone, like even if everything else was perfect and it was like, hey, we stopped doing the cross-gen stuff, a year and a half ago or whatever, and it's like everything that comes out is straight PS5, straight, well, for Xbox, it literally can't be just for Series X because that's like their whole point. But at the very least for PlayStation, even if that were the case, we're still talking price increases for 5-year-old consoles. It doesn't matter what is coming out. It doesn't matter who has what exclusives, how many exclusives they have. It doesn't matter. We're in a point where gaming consoles go up in price, and that is crazy. That's absolutely insane. Games, of course, are going up in price. And who the F knows what's going to happen with with Nintendo and the way they're trying to flip-flop around. Like, this game is $70, but this game is $80. And then when do we eventually hit that $80 price point? Like, so far, it seems like people have kind of talked the talk, and we're sitting at 70. Because I know Xbox tried it with Outer Wilds 2, and it was like, okay, $70. We understand now. But they're gonna push it. They're gonna keep trying, and the conversation keeps happening. We know GTA is gonna try to push something, and just like when 2K put out basketball, a bunch of dumb assholes are gonna be like, you know what? I can spend $100 on this, and that's perfectly fine. It's like, no, you're gonna F us up. Just like these tariffs, because the prices aren't gonna, if the tariffs magically went away, that's another thing. If the tariff just poof, disappeared, all the consoles are staying. Until they put out for Switch, they might drop it back down because they actually have the Switch 2 out. But as far as Xbox and PlayStation are concerned, they probably just keep them exactly the same. That's what businesses do. It's like, well, we were able to do it, and now we can do it without it actually costing us. So yeah, let's keep it. They definitely would. And of course, who knows how the tariff stuff is going to happen, and how all that's going to play out anyway. It's been like the big thing in the nerd community where, of course, luxuries and everything, because, we're still dealing with the egg stuff. I haven't bought eggs in like 100 million years because I'm a fat a-hole and I have to eat like 6 eggs to be full. So I stopped doing that a long time ago. I was like, I can't buy eggs because I waste them. I eat them too fast. Like, it's ridiculous for me. I need a lot of eggs to be full. So I haven't bought eggs in a million years. So that doesn't affect me, but I know egg prices are high. That's been our thing. Eggs. Crazy times out here. And now we're dealing with consoles and, all the nerdy stuff where it's like, hey, tariffs and this and that. And, all the websites where I get all my nerdy stuff is like, tariffs. You thought about tariffs? I was like, Jesus, that's all I keep hearing about is tariffs. So it's an unfortunate time. It really sucks. I mean, we've gotten the increase on the games themselves, increase on 5-year-old consoles, increase on 10-year-old consoles in the case of Nintendo, but Nintendo's Nintendo. They'd probably put it up $200 just to see what happens if they could. Like, Nintendo just does whatever they want, really. So it's a crazy time. I would love to know your thoughts on this, of course, because it's the time we're in, and obviously it's really crazy that it's happening so close to conversations about next generation stuff. I mean, I think it was last year, maybe even almost 2 years ago at this point, where they had that press conference. I forgot what conference it was, but it was some dude on stage, and he was talking about timelines of technology and stuff like that. And that was when the first conversation came up of the next generation Xbox and next generation PlayStation. And that was when we were only 4 years in. And it was like, how are they already talking about this? And we're 4 years into the generation. Obviously, if we're going off of the last generation, once again, Switch even kind of being a part of that a little bit, that's 10 years. PS4 was 10 years. Xbox, which admittedly is so much harder for me because of the amount of names and how everything still, I think even now, a lot of the Xbox games can still be played all the way back to their last generation. But I haven't had an Xbox since 360, so I always forget because of not only the names being so similar, but also the fact that they always have multiple versions of here's the worst version of the console, and then here's the greatest version of the console. So I always get confused about that because it's been so long since I played on any of their consoles anyway. But just the way that things have been going is we're a couple years in. The big conversation of, the cross-platform thing, PS4 to PS5, Xbox being hey, you got to be able to make it playable going back this many generations. And then we only get a few years in and you guys are talking about like, oh yeah, we're ready to, jump to the next thing. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, focus on this. Like, why, like, wait until this stuff is solid gold before you start talking about jumping to the next thing. Like, how are you going to do that? If anything, I find it crazy that they would be talking about the next generation, at least for PlayStation. Xbox is always trying to do like their in-between stuff. Like, they're always like so incremental that it kind of fits for them. But with PlayStation, it's kind of shocking to see them already jumping when it's like, just let people focus. Yeah, I mean, like I said, the whole cross-generation thing is like the biggest part for them, where it's like, hey, so many people don't even get to just make a PS5 game that we need the time. Like, let us see what this console can do. Obviously, PS4 Pro is kind of like the big thing where it's like, hey, this allows people to see what can be done purely on PlayStation 5. And even with updates, because, Last of Us is a good example. You bust out the PS5 version of it. But even then, it's like, graphically speaking, that's hardly updated. It really is more for having the full 4K at 60 frames or something close to it, because even then, not every game actually has full 4K 60 frames. But we'll see what happens when some of these newer games come out. Ghost of Yote, GTA, when that ends up coming out and stuff like that, seeing how these games actually operate when from day one it was like, hey, purely PS5. We'll get to see what happens with that. And we've seen it bits and pieces here and there. Obviously, when it comes to what the F is PlayStation had, clear shout out to Returnal. As everybody says, if you have not played Returnal, you are missing out on a phenomenal game. I cannot wait for Soros to come out, but I loved Returnal. Returnal is effing amazing. If you're bad at games, it's not going to be that amazing for you, but in general, that game is effing amazing. But if you suck at games, that one's going to be rough, because it's not an easy game, but man, is it fun. That's one of the best ones out there, 100%. So when it comes to those exclusives, we got Returnal. That's always like the number one shout out. But everything else is kind of cross-platform. I played a lot of stuff PS5 only, God of War Ragnarok and Horizon and stuff like that. But, there are people that, I recently watched a video where someone was like, if you look at it on PS4, the difference is like negligible. Man, that was a tough one. Haven't said that in a minute. I also get really skeptical when people say that, where it's like, you can barely tell the difference. It's like, I kind of doubt that, if I'm being totally, like, some games, sure, you can't really tell the difference, but if it's actually like a PS4 version and then the PS5 version, I get a little skeptical when people are like, yeah, you can barely tell the difference. I'm like, can you really not tell the difference? Or can you not tell the difference when you watch stuff on YouTube? Because that's a huge difference between something looking good and something not looking good. It's just like with Ghost of Yote, where people are like, this doesn't even look that good. I'm like, what are people talking about? This junk is in like full on 4K. Like, this looks insane. Like, this definitely looks different than Ghost of Tsushima. Like, there is a difference there. But I don't know. It's really interesting because, you have some games where, like Miles Morales, when that came out, that was the first game I really did it where I had my PS5 and I was actively switching and, doing that horrible system where you had to have the consoles on and switch all your files over and all that. So I was going through that process and looking at Miles Morales, the PS4 version versus the PS5 version, and that was a world of difference. And I'm like, the game, yes, it can look good, and it certainly did. When I was on the PS4, yes, it definitely looks good, because that's where I beat it, and then I was just using that as like my first ever kind of, the litmus test, or is it litness? I think it's litmus test. I don't know 100% because I don't do them. But as my first test, it was Miles Morales, and that game is a world apart. Like, just the opening cutscene, it was like, holy crap. Or just the opening, like, the start menu of the game was a huge difference. He literally had textures on his jacket. You could see the stitching, and they didn't have that on PS4. I was like, oh, this is a huge leap. And who knows if that'll even be possible going to PlayStation 6. I hope it is. I don't know if it'll matter. Consider all things considered, I don't know if that'll even matter, because it's like, well, am I really gonna jump into getting a PlayStation 6? And then am I really gonna, can I afford to wait? Because who the F knows with tariffs and everything, like, what's the price gonna be to begin with? That's the thing. The prices are gonna start coming out super expensive off the top. That way they can be like, oh yeah, look at these discounts. And it's like, that's what you would have priced it to begin with. But who knows? It's a crazy time. There's so many different conversations that kind of combine into one. And each one by itself is already bad enough. And then it's like, man, price increases. Still a bunch of PS4/PS5 games. Oh, people got to make sure it works on the Xbox Series S. There's so many different components that all end up rolling into one horrible, horrible situation. And we're just stuck. And we just have to wait and see what happens. You know, if you didn't have the consoles already, I'm sorry you got to pay more. Maybe, you know, wait till the holidays, and then, like I said, the price drops will probably just end up being what the console prices originally were, or maybe like slightly cheaper if it's a really good deal. But man, it really sucks. I think this Black Friday is going to be very fascinating. Like this holiday season, with the price increases that we've had, I'm very curious to see what the discounts are going to be. Like, are they really going to drop them down? You know, like I said, with PlayStation, it would only be like a $50 difference anyway. So it would be super easy for those to even end up below, well, I was going to say below current prices, but that's another dick move. They put those price increases out and it's like tomorrow. It's like, that's an incredible dick move. And of course, businesses will do what businesses do. But it's like, that's what makes it feel a little extra effed up. Is like, oh, okay. That's okay. Just, yeah, we're doing it tomorrow. It's like, oh, okay, Xbox did it and PlayStation did. I don't even remember how Nintendo did. I think theirs was maybe like a 2-day separation, but still, it was, you know, like 3 business days and you're effed, and that was how it went. So, you know, yet another element of it where it's like, could have at least tried. They could have done anything they wanted to do. They could have. And this is what they chose. So that's just how it is. You know, that's how it is. Companies will company. So it's unfortunate, but it's where we are. We'll have to see where it goes. You know, game prices increasing, game consoles increasing. We just have to wait and see, you know, next generation, whatever the F that's going to be on both sides of the fence, because, you know, Xbox is just disappearing into the streaming ether, and who the F knows what that means. But we'll see with that. We'll see with PlayStation 6, and we'll see in general just how the F this goes. You know, I love video games. It's my favorite, you know, hobby. So we'll just have to wait and see. In good news, very random good news, shout out to Remedy, 30 years, absolutely amazing. I may or may not have spent over $200 on some Remedy 30th anniversary merch, but that's neither here nor there. But for me, that's good news. Insanely overpriced. I spent a lot of money on a book, but, you know, it's better than a $100 increase on an Xbox. But anyway, hope you guys are okay. I hope you got the consoles already, but if not, wait till Black Friday. Let's see what happens. I think that'll be the big thing. We'll see what happens when Black Friday hits. Where do the price drops come in? Get all your games cheap. I mean, at this point, unless it's Resident Evil, I don't think I can ever buy a game full price. I do the $70 thing, but if we go up to $80, I don't know. I do not know about that. I'm barely buying games at $70 because not much is coming out where I'm like, I need it anyway. Ghost of Yotei and Resident Evil. That's literally where I'm at. Honestly, it's kind of all Capcom. After Ghost, it's Resident Evil, Onimusha I'm getting day one, and Pragmata I think I'm gonna get day one. We'll see about it, but I'm fairly certain. I'm already kind of in on that one too. So Capcom has me, and other than that, I'm kind of set. I'm kind of set on the backlog, but that's where we are. I would love to know your thoughts on the increase in all things gaming. Accessories have gone up, consoles have gone up, games are going up, back and forth at least, you know, flip-flopping around until they can finally stick the landing on, you know, getting people to spend 80. But I would love to know your thoughts on the price increases in general. But, you know, now we've hit it with PlayStation, at least in the States. Like I said, they technically already done it overseas, but we'd love to know your thoughts on it. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.